Welcome to Paranormal M, where the mysterious meets the extraordinary. Subscribe now and tap the bell to uncover chilling stories. Prepare to be drawn into a world of the unexplained. Creepy alien contact. One summer when I was 12, I was staying up late by myself and felt the urge to go outside. I went out my front door in a well-lit subdivision at probably 2 a.m. and saw strange lights and heard beeping noises coming from an adjacent street. I walked down to the entrance of that street, and I shit you not, it was a classic saucer-shaped UFO sitting in a cul-de-sac. I ran back to my house and tried to wake up my brother, but he wouldn't budge. I woke up my mom. She told me it was probably just a telephone transistor malfunctioning and to go back to sleep. I worked up the courage to go down there and see it one more time. I noticed that even with the sound and lights, not one other person was outside. I eventually went back home and went straight to my room and fell asleep. This was highly unusual for me, as I always had a hard time getting to sleep, and especially after I saw a damn UFO. You would think I'd be freaking out a little bit more. I didn't even discuss it with my family in the morning. A week or so later, I woke up out of a dead sleep and thought to myself, and then I repeated loudly, "Hello, hello, hello." It still gave me chills around 20 years later. Something answered me back in a high-pitched, metallic-sounding voice. It said, "Hi." I immediately passed out from fear and remembered nothing else. Woke up in the morning, and again, I didn't feel the need to tell my family the fucked up thing that happened. A few years later, when the internet got bigger, I started looking for UFO reports in my area around that time, and there were several confirmed sightings of an unidentified light or craft in the sky from reputable sources, and at least one from a police officer. I don't believe in anything paranormal or spiritual, but I have no explanation for what I saw tonight. So, I have a dog, and I almost always walk her at night due to my schedule. I'm currently living with my parents, who live in a very upscale private community, one which I'm extremely familiar with and have walked hundreds of times before, both during the day and night. It's a very safe place. I never feel any sort of risk walking at night aside from visibility to passing cars, for which I wear reflective armbands. Tonight I was just taking my dog on her daily walk. We crossed a road that led from one section of the subdivision to another. While entering this next section, I noticed up ahead, about 80 to 100 meters, a figure moving down the road across from the direction I was going. The best way I can describe it's like a person was wearing a slightly luminescent white hat skipping down the street. The problem is, first of all, there wasn't enough light to get a clear view of whatever I saw. I could definitely see the light that appeared to be a hat of a person wearing one, but not enough to discern anything more. The most disconcerting thing was that even if it was a person wearing a light-up hat skipping down the street, they would have been moving in slow motion, almost suspended in air in between jumps. There was also no sound either. After seeing this, I yelled out several times asking if there was anyone there. I didn't get any response. At that point, I noticed that my dog was whimpering and had her tail between her legs. For me, this was the scariest part because I've never seen her act like that in any situation ever. If she sees another person while we're out walking, she'll get excited and pull on the leash, wanting to go up and say hi. If there's another dog or an animal she's unsure of, she'll bark and start running in circles around me. I've never, under any circumstance, seen her act scared and start whimpering. That was enough to make me go, nope, and turn the hell around. And, like I said, I don't have any belief in anything paranormal, but I have no intention of fucking around with whatever the hell I just encountered. So we turned around, finished our walk, and admittedly, I glanced behind frequently, making sure there wasn't anyone following me. We're now home and safe, with kind of leads up to me typing this out right now. I've never experienced something like that, and I have no idea what to think. Rationally, I think it'd be more likely I hallucinated or something rather than it being anything paranormal. But the thing that bugs me the most is my dog's extremely uncharacteristic reaction. If I had been seeing things, then why would she have behaved in a way that she never had before? Saw something lurking in my closet this morning. This morning I had the most frightening experience of my life. Just to put a setting in place, my room has my bed in the middle against the back wall, directly in front of my closet. Anyway, back to the story. I woke up with a sweat around 2 a.m. thinking it was too hot. It's getting hotter in Australia. So I got up to turn on my fan. I felt paranoia as anybody would feel walking across their room at 2 a.m. But something was strange, something was watching me. I don't know where from, but I thought nothing of it. I put quiet music on in my home. Or in my Google home. What is that? Then I went back to sleep. I woke up maybe at 3:50 a.m. again, still sweating. This was strange as I just turned on my fan and my music had stopped and my Google Home was showing the sign that it was trying to connect to the Wi-Fi. I realized I was too tired to move, so I shifted my eyes to in front of me to reveal my closet. Then I saw someone staring at me with a flat expression. I squinted my eyes to see if I was looking clearly, but as I realized I was in reality and everything was real, I realized I was awake. A flat expression shifted to a large smile. I got up in my bed to get my fight or flight instincts ready, but by the time I lifted myself up, the noise of something falling came from my closet and the doors closed. My Google Home reconnected to the Wi-Fi and blared my music aloud. My parents walked into my room and said, "What's going on? What's the noise?" I explained everything. They believed me. We ended up moving my mattress into the floor into my parents' room. Anyway, now it's been maybe 10 hours since this experience, and I'm still shocked and in confusion. What if I never woke up? Was the sweat a warning sign? Why was my Wi-Fi disconnected from my Google Home and reconnected when it was closed shut? If anybody had, a similar experience, help me out. I'm scared to go into my room now. I know it's easy for me to be seeing stuff, but it reacted when I knew I was awake, but something is not right. I always wonder if this entry hadn't saved me from something terrible. I lived in a haunted house when I was a kid. Always felt uneasy, like I was being watched, especially at night. I'd often have intrusive thoughts and emotions, like don't make noise or you'll be in trouble. It was more aimed at a shed near property, like whatever was there was dangerous. Whenever I was outside, I would keep it in my sights. I even saw an apparition, an old man with thinning hair wearing a white shirt and blue jeans. They were overalls, and they were unlatched on one side. His face looked, normal, and yet at the same time like it was warping and my mind didn't understand what I was seeing. He just glared at the house from across the street, until he realized I was looking at him. Then he turned to stare at me. I was frozen, which actually happened before I even saw him, just the spot itself, until my mother, who'd gone inside, called for me and broke whatever was happening. When I looked back, he was gone. This was the same house where I was diagnosed with epilepsy, had my first real only sleepwalking incident of which I remember everything about. Like I specifically recall, wavering for several minutes before grabbing my pillow and taking it with me. If my mother hadn't woken up and I'd gotten caught by a kitchen chair, I feel like I would have gone outside, if not to the shed itself. A few years back, we were back in that area and my mother decided she wanted to drive by it. The emotions I felt were still there. only they seemed stronger than I'd remembered. The intrusive thoughts were there, too. They were saying that we needed to leave, that we weren't meant to be there. No one was meant to be there. Now that I'm older, I feel like an old man was separate from the uneasy feeling I felt about the shed. I'm certain it was him who didn't like noise who left the intrusive thoughts and feelings that I'd get in trouble if I'm too loud. But the shed seemed different. The house still stands empty from what I know, and it's overgrown and falling apart. We were told nobody ever lived there for too long. Exploring abandoned school. So me and my friend found an abandoned school building and decided to check it out on the inside. When we entered, there was nothing too weird going on. We walked a bit around looking into classes and guessing what they might have been for. We were somewhere on the second floor when we started hearing footsteps on the third floor, moving to the attic. My friend wanted to leave, but I decided to check it out. When we entered the attic, though, it was completely empty, except for some interesting items. The first odd thing I saw was a random ladder that had been sprayed with paint. Just a table and pants, also painted with paint, and a knife. I decided to leave and I noticed the knife, and this is when I heard the basement door slam, and not just normally slam, but violently slam. We stayed silent for a few seconds until we heard footsteps going down to the basement with heavy steps. When we noticed this, we decided to take this chance and just bolt. We ran downstairs to the main floor as fast as we could, running out of the building, taking our bikes, and got the hell out of there. We came home safely, not believing what possibly could have happened if she got to us, until I froze. My friend asked what was wrong until I said, "Where was the person that entered the attic?" Didn't hear or notice anyone leave the attic, and it was completely empty. So, where did he or she go? We still don't know the answer. Unknown. Throughout my life, I've experienced a plethora of paranormal happenings. I'm not a medium, I don't think. I don't talk to ghosts or see them often, but I would say I'm sensitive particularly to sensations and energies. But those stories are a bit lame, so I'll go into detail about the experience that really matter. Starting with the longest as well as most significant story that I can remember, which is around 7th grade. One of my closest friends at the time had a haunted house that was built during the times of the Underground Railroad. And based on the layout of the basement and the history of the area, we also used as a stop for those traversing the Underground Railroad. I had some weird experiences there, seeing the back half of people around corners or ominous feeling like sensations, but nothing like this. He had a large basement with what was basically opened portions of the walls for storage. A bit above the ground, like a window with no glass that led back about 10 feet or so. Crawl space is what I think they're called. The basement was laid out in a way so that when you come down the stairs, there's a wall on the right. A wall just in front at the bottom. So you went to the basement on the left. In doing so, you're welcomed into a large rectangular room with a door about 10 feet on the left leading to a smaller room, as well as 2 doors straight ahead. That's on the opposite side of the room. That was basically a large closet on the left side and a propped open door leading to under his front porch. That's where any bit of light would come that I could really remember by debris and trash. In that smaller room I mentioned on the left side of the main room, that was where those interesting storage areas were. Maybe 2 or 3 of those crawl spaces, one on each of the inside walls. It kind of gave the impression that something or someone was being hidden in that basement. Hope that makes sense. That's just a design. It would do the story well to explain how ominous this house was. As I said before, I pick up on energies and feelings, often getting a bit of my tingle down my spine when I feel things. This house was heavy, sad, and extremely grating. As a kid, I loved ghosts. Still do. I found myself over there constantly trying to work up the courage to go down to the basement and ghost hunt. Usually, nobody else would want to do it, but on this specific night, it was just me and the kid who lived there. I'll call him Aiden. I was actually able to convince him to ghost hunt with me. I'd brought an old camcorder with a shitty night vision mode, an EVP recorder, and some flashlights. We went around the main floor doing what kids do, asking is anyone there, and freaking ourselves out. We went from room to room and repeated this tactic. Nothing happened, not until we went into the basement. As we worked up the courage to do so, I open the old door and I'm greeted with pitch darkness. I flick on my flashlight and we make our move. We rounded the corner at the bottom of the stairs, those old wooden kind with the gaps in between, with me leading the charge full of false confidence and excitement. We flashed our lights around the main room, scanning over large piles of trash and debris that the old unfinished basement had piled up over the years and years of neglect. Spider webs and dust skewed our vision a bit deeper into the room. We trudged forward, making sure to watch our step. Our first goal was to enter the side room off to the left. A large storage room with shelves and, of course, those crawl spaces I'd mentioned. We asked the typical questions as I switched on the camera. Aiden did the same with the EVP recorder. I felt cold, but it was cold that night, so I brushed it off. "Is anyone here?" Seconds went by with no sounds. "Can you send us a sign?" Nothing. I scanned my flashlight through the crawl spaces and I saw nothing but large tunnels of dirt and debris. It was creepy, yeah, but nothing more than some kids being afraid of the dark. We moved on and out of that room, back into the rectangular main room. We moved toward the small closet and the propped open door, continuing our questions when Aiden decided he wanted to go inside the closet one. He wanted to do this alone. I decided that that was fine. I stood outside alone asking my own questions and quietly shitting my pants. It was terrifying, such a heavy and disturbing presence, but nothing happened. Nothing but silence. After what felt like 10 minutes, Aiden exited the room disappointed and said he'd gotten nothing. I sighed in agreement and we resigned ourselves to going upstairs to regroup and try something else. We walk about halfway down the rectangular room toward the stairs when we hear a loud, grating, scraping sound from just behind us. Then a sudden bang. We both scream desperately and run for the stairs, tripping a bit on the way and using our hands like dogs to propel ourselves up the stairs in record time. Going up those stairs with the gaps in them, I just barely registered that the propped open door had been slammed shut. I didn't have time to look. I couldn't look. I had to get out of there. A few minutes go by of us in utter disbelief, asking ourselves what the fuck just happened. It was all so fast and yet so painstakingly slow. All that silence just led up to me making the conclusion that much scarier. We couldn't just leave it be. Of course not. We were kids. White kids at that. Okay. So, we decided to go back down and officially see what had happened. We turned on the overhead lights and cautiously made our way down. As I suspected, the door was slammed shut, but not firmly like I assumed. There was a small crack filled with piled-up trash and debris, but it had still closed significantly. We looked around for any explanation as Aiden insisted profusely that this door had never been shut. Then we found something, an old hard plastic Nalgene water bottle. It was in a crack. It was covered in dust and debris, now full of deep scratches and scrapes. based on the position of the bottle and the door that we assumed it was what was propping the door open. If it wasn't, it was evidence that something unnatural had happened. It was ripped like someone ran a mile with it, scraping the ground, and scratched like Wolverine got his claws on it. The door had shut so violently with the bottle just under it, it had basically crushed the bottle as it slammed itself shut for no discernible reason. In fact, the way the debris were piled up in the crack of the door with the bottle made it impossible for it to swing shut from wind or gravity. It would take considerable force, even for an adult to shut it at all. We couldn't believe it. Just kind of gave up and all went upstairs to think about it until we passed out. I still have no explanation. That's one story. I have many more, but I'll cherry-pick the best ones for you guys. The next one was in my friend's house, and the layout is irrelevant, so hopefully you guys won't be as confused. Me and my friend Clay and our mutual friend Will, all fake names for privacy, went to sleep at Clay's house watching some shitty movie, and of course everybody fell asleep before me. Clay's house was haunted too, not in the same way that Aiden's, but definitely an ominous place to be in. Some of my friends, including Clay, claimed to have seen a man in a tall black hat and suit in the basement window more than once. I have picked up on a woman in white that other friends have also expressed feeling or seeing. I say picked up on rather than seen because I didn't see her with my eyes, but more in my head. Like I knew the position halfway up the stairs facing me with a large white puffy dress and her hand on the banister, face obscured by the stairway ceiling. Hard to explain, but not super exciting nor relevant, but it does help set the scene. Anyways, I'm laying on the floor in front of the TV, about 5 feet away from Will. He's also sleeping on the floor right next to Clay's bed, which he of course was sleeping in. I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. Being the last awake in a house, I already felt the creeps in, but eventually, before I knew it, I had passed out. Next thing I know, I'm waking up to a menu of the movie playing over and over again. Back in the days when Netflix was so new that people still used DVDs. I was half awake and groggy, but something was off. It was so silent, and yet the flashing light of the menu screen and the faint music filled the whole room. I look at my friend Will sleeping peacefully on the ground. Can only really make out his shape as his face was facing the other direction. He was knocked out, and seeing him made me feel a bit at ease. I look around the room, watching as the light cascades over Clay's furniture. Turn my attention to the door. I see that it's closed, which also eases my stress a bit. Then I shift my body to my side and look up to Clay's bed. Looming over him is an oblong black shadow or mist, for lack of a better word. It was undulating, sort of rhythmically, like a heartbeat or something. At first, my brain wrote it off as a shadow created by the light that was beaming from the TV, but then the menu shifted to a scene briefly that was much brighter, and the room was illuminated significantly, showing the black shadow even more clearly. But it didn't change. With this bit of light, I could make out the depth of the shadow. Off the wall a bit and in the air, instead of plastered against the wall, and yet it became no brighter. No bits of its form were illuminated, but everything around it was. It was like it absorbed the light rather than reflecting it, like a natural object would. I was very suddenly lulled back into sleep, no longer in fear or anything, just passed out. It was as if this figure noticed my gaze and didn't want me to see. When we all awoke, all of us had our pants down, our thighs around our knees. Me and Clay were wearing jeans with our belts fully buckled when we passed out, and yet they were undone and around our knees. It was pretty violating, but at the very least we still had on our underwear, and we were teen boys, so we just laughed it off, or tried to. I told them about what I saw, but I'm sure they didn't believe me. Looking back, I'm disturbed more by the pants than the apparition. Agree. Years later, I was living in a house with my mom, and we absolutely loved it. To clarify, for purpose of the story, this house didn't feel haunted to me. It had its weird moments, but it was a pretty regular house. It had a finished basement where my brother and I stayed. For purposes of the story, I'll explain the layout around the area of the house. There's a landing and square hallway, that's when you entered, and it had a bathroom on the right, room just ahead and a room on the left. Further on the left was an entrance to the basement. From the entrance to this landing, you had a good peripheral view down the stairs. The stairs went down about 5 steps before the wall opened up on the left side, revealing a view into the basement living room. At the bottom of these stairs, they turned to the left, which was clearly in view from the top of the stairs, thanks to that open portion of the wall. Again, I hope that makes sense. I got home from school one day when I finally got my own car. There's no one else parked, just me, newly freed teen with the ability to finally go where I please. I was so excited about driving that I didn't really register that there was no one there in front of my mind. It was an afterthought. Came into the house, eventually entered that little landing I told you about. Out of the corner of my eye, I'm at left of the bottom of the stairs. On that left side, just barely in view from that exposed wall, I saw something. Or someone. I did a bit of a light double take and looked directly for enough time to register a boy, about 14 or 15, with that kind of emo Justin Bieber haircut. The one where one of your eyes are obscured a bit. He was standing facing the wall, looking toward the stairs, but not at me. He had brown hair and a jacket that was, as far as I can really remember, either black or gray or black and brown. It did have black stripes for sure, horizontal across the unzipped earth, 2010's looking jacket. He was a white kid, maybe 5'8" or 5'9" max, wearing either jeans or khakis. I got all of this from my peripheral view in a very, very short direct view. It was years ago, so forgive me if I'm forgetting a bit. I thought nothing of it. I thought nothing of it because this was my brother. But the weird thing was, this was my brother about 3, maybe 4 years before we had moved to that house. A preteen when we were at the time about 17 or 18 and 19, 20 respectively. As this all happens in a second or less, I turn back to the stairs absent-mindedly and go into the bathroom to wash my hands. I had something sticky or gross on them from whatever. As I did this, I call out, "What's up, man? Didn't see your car. Did you drop someone off?" I just kind of looked at myself in the mirror, expecting an answer. Nothing comes. Starting to hit me as I process everything I saw and realized there was no response as well as no cars outside. My stomach dropped. I came out from the bathroom, peered down the stairs. Silence. Ran down expecting an intruder or something, and I scoured the entire basement. No one was there. I was sweating bullets. I was beginning to realize that even if that was my brother, he was so much younger than he was supposed to be. He's wearing the style of clothes he didn't wear anymore. He was expressionless, maybe even featureless. I didn't look long enough. I ran upstairs and sat with my dogs until he got home. Only took about 20 minutes as he was at a friend's house just down the street, and we all had plans. He was in disbelief too. He brushed it off and we all just kind of moved on. I had one more experience in that house that sticks with me. I was in my room in my bed, which was situated in a way where the closet and I had just kind of on the left about 5 feet. I was watching something on my little TV and kind of tunnel-visioned on whatever scene I was watching when I just heard something rustle in the closet. It was very light, almost unregistered sound like clothes hanger shifting its weight. I look over and gasp slightly. A hand, almost orangish or yellowish. It was just beyond the wrist and facing me from the right side of the closet, the side that went back a bit behind the wall. As quickly as I'd seen it, it retreated into the closet behind the wall. Instantly, I shot up and checked to find that, you guessed it, nothing. Nothing out of order or anything. Weirdest thing was that it made no noise when it retreated, but it moved so fast. Inhumanly fast, like if you got shocked and your arm just immediately retreats without you meaning to even move it, but even faster. kind of just sat down and looked there for a bit. It never happened again. I did have one more story from this house, but it happened while on psychedelics, so I hesitate to share it in fear that people will amount it to tripping. Seems fair, though. Finally, I get to my more miscellaneous stories. These ones are going to be a little bit more rapid fire, but I think they're relevant enough to tell, and they seem to get good reactions with friends and family when I tell them. The first still haunts me to this day. When I was around 9 or 10, my grandfather passed away. He had a super nice house, and after the funeral, everybody gathered there to talk memories and mourn the man that he was. I, as a little kid, didn't really understand it at all yet, and I really had to poo. I know, kind of gross, but we all do it. I don't think the leader of North Korea does. Went into the bathroom on the main floor and sat in there for maybe 5 minutes listening to the ambient sounds of talking just outside and trying to distract myself from the discomfort of making any sounds or leaving myself. That's when the silence is broken by a boisterous and manly laugh. It was echoing all around. It was just a quick one. It was sort of like, and I legit shit myself. Quickly, I cleaned up on the toilet and ran outside, interrupting everyone else, asking, did any of you just laugh? They all kind of shook their heads, and my dad said, no one's laughing. I felt super embarrassed, so I just let it go. Looking back, I don't think anybody did. It was a funeral, but I never forgot. I think it was my grandpa. I remember his little, I guess you'd call it a living laugh. That's because he died when I was so young, and we didn't really visit him often. He lived hours away. I think I remember the laugh. Next, I'm in my mom's current home. I don't live with her anymore, but at the time I did. I was with my girlfriend in my room, and I asked if she wanted some food. She said yes, and being the young adults we were, made us some nachos. Went alone, and the whole house was dark. It's a really small house. Basically a trailer, but not. There's not much space to be freaked out in. Also, we have so many animals all the time, so they kind of kept me sane. As I walked down the dark hallway, I distinctly remember seeing all 3 of her cats asleep in the couch in the living room off to the right. I get to the kitchen, I get to work with no issue. I successfully handcrafted a masterful plate of nachos. Man, I'm hungry. I was headed back to my room. I turned off the kitchen lights behind me. As I round the corner to my room, I hear thud, 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 thud right behind me. It was increasing intensity with each step until it basically was on my back. I pivot as fast as humanly possible, and I see nothing. The hairs on the back of my head and neck are going crazy. Nobody was there, not even a cat or a dog. I checked. Everywhere, all around me. Nothing at the end of the hallway either, nothing. And if it was a person or an animal, there's no way they could clear the hallway without any noise or at least me seeing them. I shuffled into my room, told my girlfriend. She didn't believe really me. Still probably doesn't. The last stories are dreams, but I promise they're relevant. My girlfriend's house is really old, and since the first time I've been there, I've sensed a younger adult woman ghost in her basement. She watches me. Specifically me, I think. Maybe because I'm a man and that house is all women and one small boy at the time this happened. Maybe she doesn't like men, or just me. I never saw her, but I could always feel her. Still haven't to this day seen her, and I don't know if I will really, but sometimes things happen there. Small things. Small sounds like a step or a moving object. But I had this dream one night when I was sleeping there. Standing at the bottom of her stairs in the basement, almost locked in place. To my right is where they have a water furnace about 20 feet back. There was a miscellaneous storage stuff in front of me and to my left. It was exactly like it is in real life, or the way it was at the time. Couldn't take my eyes off the furnace. I wanted to, but I just couldn't. That's when she emerged from behind it, walking up from the left side. A white woman with dark brown hair and a white dress, as they often are. She stared at me. She had no face or features, or at least they were changing too much to tell. I watched as she slowly came toward me. I tried to scream or run or fight, but I couldn't. She approached closer and closer, so I struggled to... She was just feet away. That's when I gave up and I said, just fucking get it over with. She got closer, reached out her arms, and she was grabbing me, and it all went black, and then I realized my eyes were open in a dark bedroom. I was awake now, and it was just a dream. But it all felt so real, like a message, not necessarily threatening, but not friendly either. Lastly is a story my girlfriend and I discuss a lot. My girlfriend's mother had a husband who passed away tragically. He was murdered. Neither of us knew him because it was before either of us were born, but it had left a massive impact on her and her family. Her great-grandmother, when my girlfriend was born, said, "I can't believe he's back so soon," referring to the late husband. Nobody knows what she meant, but my girlfriend infers that she's a reincarnation of him, or that he just protects her, leaning more in the latter. One of my first times staying at my girlfriend's house, I had to sleep on the couch away from her. We were 16 and her mom's pretty traditional. I fell asleep no problem, but awoke in a strange dream. I was watching from the perspective of something high up, close to the ceiling in the living room where I slept. But it wasn't now. I was watching as this young white man knocked on the door and my girlfriend and her mom opened it. I specify white because in the dream, I was not white, and I knew that. This is important because my girlfriend's mother's late husband was a Mexican man, just as her father is, and I felt anger. The white teenager came in and had bags of clothes and stuff, smiling, making pleasantries as he tried to come in. They helped him into the living room and started talking and eating. The anger I felt grew. I watched as time passed like a time lapse, but I stayed the same. Those multiple days of this white kid being integrated into the family in what felt like my family. I felt like he was fake. I felt like he was a fraud and a bad influence, and I hated him more and more as time passed. Suddenly, it cut to a night, and I'm in the same position on the ceiling. My point of view turns down to the couch right below me, where the kid now slept. In the same exact position that I was sleeping in real life. My anger boiled up inside of me like a fire burning in the pit of hell, and I started growling as I got close to him and floated over him. The kid groggily looks up at me and we lock eyes. He looks horrified. Then I yell as the anger boiled over. I yelled as hard as I could to signify that he's not welcome. He tried to scream, but he couldn't, or I couldn't. I was awake now, trying to, I think that I was trying to scream with everything in me, but I was just whimpering. I felt so hopeless and scared. Getting chills writing this, as cliche as that sounds. This dream has left a massive mark on me. Now I always think about how my girlfriend's guardian angel warned me to not fuck up. The way a dad would with their daughter. Never got that from my dad. Or from my girlfriend's dad, as, well, he left her when she was young and was not a good father or husband at all. Prankster spirit at a truck stop in New Mexico. This all happened about a decade ago. It was at a TA travel center in New Mexico. I worked the night shift as a prep cook there. While there, I had a few strange experiences that I'll detail now. The first was pretty standard. I was chopping onions and out of the corner of my eye, see a figure walk past me and stop in the corner. When I turned to look, no one was there, and I felt the base of my spine go ice cold. So to clarify, my family has a history with spirits. I had a great-grandma who was a medium. I used to see shadow figures all the time in my childhood home until I was 15 or so. Then I started seeing them again when I was in a deep depression with suicidal tendencies. Much better now, in my early 20s. That chill down my spine always accompanied these experiences, and I use it as an indicator that a spirit is maybe near. Anyway, after that first experience, I started to ask around, and this was a common occurrence here. 3 or 4 people had the exact same thing happen. Busy with a task, a dark figure at the edge of their vision walks by. That's when they turn to look, and it's gone. It would happen again occasionally, but I just ignore it. The second wasn't a single incident, but something that happened regularly. Usually after seeing it in the corner of my eye again. Part of my job as prep cook was to make large batches of soups and chilies for the next day. I'd put these 5-gallon pots on the burners with the meat and start browning and turn to chop the veggies, and when I turned back, all my burners would be off. Fairly innocuous, but it happened too often for it to be my error, and again, it was accompanied by a chill in my spine. And the chili in front of you. The final incident actually happened to somebody else, but I was present for it. To explain, here's a quick rundown of really how to walk out or in, how the whole thing was laid out. The door was in my prep kitchen. Inside the walk-in was a second door that led to a freezer. The freezer had its own light switch that was located in the regular walk-in fridge. So the line cook goes into the walk-in. I think nothing of it until he comes out a hot few minutes later wanting to kick my ass. After I calm him down, he tells me he was in the freezer section when all of a sudden the lights turn out. Then he starts to hear a man laughing coming from the main walk-in. I let him know that not only was it not me, but I'd been in the kitchen the whole time and no one else had gone in. He goes white as a sheet and didn't want to talk any more about it. Anyway, those are my experiences at that truck stop. Thankfully, I have not much contact with the other side now, and I'm in better headspace. But I have a couple others from my time in New Mexico, if anyone's interested. Ghost with a sunflower mask. At the start of the year, I went to the Philippines for about 2 weeks and spent around 10 days at my late grandmother's house. My grandma died in 2010. This was the first time I had visited the country since 2008. My mom and her siblings have shared custody of my grandparents' house, but it's usually empty unless family's coming into town. There are 3 rooms in the house, an office, a large spare bedroom, and my grandma's room. Since I'm a 23-year-old male and was staying in the house with my mom and my 2 other aunts, I was assigned to stay in my grandma's room by myself. The first night I didn't see anything. The second night I went out with my cousins and just treated them to dinner and some drinks. I wasn't out super late. I probably got back around 12 or 1 in the morning. I also didn't drink very much due to jet lag. Naturally, I went to bed as soon as I got back. At around 4 in the morning, I was on my side and I woke up momentarily to roll onto my back. As I rolled over, I opened my eyes. I saw a figure at the foot of my bed. I'd been trying to dismiss it as a shadow or a sleep paralysis creature, but I was wide awake at this point and could make out details of it from the ambient lighting from the window. It was humanoid and it was solid, and it was wearing some type of bedtime gown, except it looked like it didn't have its arms and its sleeves. The most particular detail, or peculiar perhaps, is the sunflower mask it seemed to be wearing over its face. I couldn't make out any particular colors of its clothing or features other than the palette of grays. I immediately froze in bed, took 2 or 3 panicked breaths. It was visible for all of about maybe 3 seconds, then it sort of dusted away all at once. Like when Thanos snapped in the Avengers. I grabbed my phone a couple of seconds later to check the time and ended up staying up the rest of the night watching YouTube videos to distract myself from what I just saw. I told the rest of my family about it in the morning. My older Filipino relatives are pretty superstitious, but they couldn't explain this one either. They said it probably wasn't my grandmother since she knew our family was afraid of ghosts to the point where she requested my grandfather not to come back in any form when he was sick. My uncle said the room I was staying in was used for storage most of the time. So maybe there's a resident spirit that was curious about who was in its room. Either way, I didn't sleep well the rest of the time I was there, but I haven't seen the form ever since. I've looked online for any sort of lore on masked ghosts with little success. I've only run into stories of Japanese spirits with no faces. What do you guys think I saw? Are there any superstitions or stories about spirits like this that you're aware of? The mask sounds cool. My great-aunt recently passed away. She passed away last Friday. She lived where I grew up, almost 2,000 miles away. I had a dream with her in it on Monday morning. In the dream, she was angry, upset, and ready to pass on. I would call her at least once or twice a month, so after that dream, felt like I needed to call her as soon as possible. On Monday after work, I called and no answer. Tuesday after work, she picked up. She sounded very irritated, and I'd never heard her sound like that before. While at work Wednesday, it started snowing pretty heavily. I stupidly didn't have gloves in my car, and so before leaving the parking lot, I used my bare hands to remove the snow from my windows. Ouch. Only after I was driving for a few minutes did I realize that my wedding ring came off. I went back that night to look and spent almost 3.5 hours looking in the snow on Thursday after work. When I was still at work on Friday, I received a call from my mother that my great-aunt passed away. After my dream and final conversation with her, I honestly wasn't very surprised. After hearing the news, I spent a couple of minutes looking for my ring on Friday. Today, I briefly looked for my ring during lunch. After work, I started looking again. I was looking through some weeds in the front of the parking spots and all the snow that's now melted. At one point, I turned around to see where I was in relation to where my car had been parked last Wednesday. As soon as I turned around, I looked down and immediately saw the ring. I swear I'd looked at that spot during lunchtime today, yet there it was. Whether or not my great-aunt Carol helped me find my wedding ring today, I sure do love and miss her. And I'm glad you got your ring back. Haven't been able to sleep for weeks. Some background. When I was a kid, I guess I used to have night terrors where my parents couldn't wake me up. I guess I would sleepwalk sometimes and my mom would find me talking to the wall. I guess I was a weird kid. I grew out of it mostly, but sometimes I'll have a nightmare and wake myself up screaming. So getting to the full story. I recently went home for Christmas. I couldn't stay in my bedroom in the basement because it's currently a construction zone. So my mom has moved my bed into my sister's old room on the second floor. Now, this room is creepy. Seems like a totally normal room when you're in it. But when you're in it for too long, you start to get paranoid and just a general sense of dread. It used to be my bedroom until I moved into the basement. So I go through Christmas break and all, and everything's fine, sleeping in the creepy room. When I fly back to Chicago, things start to not be normal. I live in a studio, and it's rather large by my cats and... well, rather large, but my cats. They've been up my butt lately. Like, they won't leave me alone, and they have to be in the same area with me at all times. They even sleep with me all night. Which, this is where it gets concerning. I sleep all through the night normally, but I've been having the same dream every frickin' night where around 2 or 3 a.m. something creeps up from under my bed and it's squatting by me and grabs my arm. It looks like the Pale Man from Pan's Labyrinth. That guy with the weird eyes, I think. I chalked it up to stress, and this morning I woke up because I went back to sleep after the same dream and my arm hurts and I have some weird bruising. Don't know about the Pan's Labyrinth guy, but your cats might miss you. So, I've been hearing a voice. My boyfriend, Simon, 30 years old, and I don't want to mispronounce your name, but it's spelled T-E-I, Tay, 26 years old, moved in together less than a month ago. Our apartment is almost perfect, minus, of course, the voice I've been hearing. When we viewed the apartment before signing the lease, everything seemed fine. No weird vibes, smells, or anything. It's just a nice 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor. Our first night in the apartment, however, got a little bit weird. Simon is really anal about cleanliness. So before we moved in any of our stuff, our previous places, we had to spend a night and day just cleaning. Also, he's an African immigrant and his family's quite spiritual. So we had to do a couple of cleansing rituals to try and get rid of any sort of bad juju. We burned sage and incense, prayed, and dripped some kind of ritual oil in all of the corners and closets. Now, I'm personally not very knowledgeable about the stuff that we did. I didn't grow up in any sort of spiritual environment like he did, but I'm a supportive girlfriend and know that the rituals meant a lot to him, so I did my part. At one point, Simon asked if I would go and burn incense in the guest bedroom closet while he worked on oiling the kitchen. We'd been cleaning and doing rituals all evening, so it was pretty late at this point, maybe 11 or 12 at night. And, as stated earlier, we didn't have any of our stuff in the place yet. If you've lived in apartments, you know that at times they don't have ceiling lights and you need to rely on the lamps in the bedrooms. So there's no light in the guest bedroom except for my flashlight and my phone. I went in with the incense, heading for the closet. And in about the center of the room, I got this horrible pit in my stomach and my body just froze. All the hair on my arms stood up and something in my brain was just begging for me to leave that room. So, naturally, I noped out the guest bedroom real quick. I found Simon, and I asked him to come in the room with me to do this incense. I told him that it creeped me out in there. He kind of gave me an exasperated look, and he said he'd trade with me. So he lit the incense in the guest bedroom closet, and I oiled the kitchen. When he finished in there, I asked him if he felt anything weird or creepy. He said no, and continued to deny anything strange about the room when I pressed. So the rituals finished, and the move passed without incident. Though I couldn't go back into that room for the rest of the night. Each time I looked into the blackness of the dark room, I felt that same sick, creeped-out feeling. The next incident occurred after living in the apartment for 4 or 5 days. Simon works in 9 to 6-ish, Monday through Friday. Whilst I'm currently working remotely, so I'm in the apartment a lot more than he is. It was late in the morning, and I was working from my laptop. I was seated on the floor at my coffee table in the living room. From where I was seated, the hallway that leads to the bedroom was behind and to the left of me. I could see slightly into the guest bedroom if I looked over my shoulder. The room was a wreck at this point, kind of being used as our storage room for all of our junk that didn't have a place in the apartment yet. Nothing strange had happened since that first night, and I'd been in the guest bedroom plenty of times in the past few days without feeling weird. So I decided that it was just me feeling overtired and on edge that caused the fear from before. I was about to get up and get another cup of coffee. That's when I heard a noise from the direction of the guest bedroom. A dragging sound. It was short, lasting only a second. It sounded sort of like something heavy, like a full cardboard box or a laundry bag being dragged a foot or two across carpet. My head whipped around so fast in the direction of the noise, I held my breath and stared with saucer-sized eyes at the little I could view of the room, waiting to see if I had heard it again. I stayed like that until I had to breathe. Then I waited longer, staring, but it was perfectly quiet. Something you should know about our apartment. The building is quite small, and our only neighbors are a single man above, a couple below, and some guys in the other first-floor apartment. The other apartment on our floor is empty, as well as the other on the 3rd floor. So for now, the building is relatively unoccupied. I can look out the windows and watch as each neighbor goes to work, and I find throughout the week that I can be the only person in the building. It feels more isolated than any other apartments I've lived in. It also gets me really quiet when I'm just at home working, so that's why I'd even notice something as soft and quick as the dragging sound. It didn't happen again. I just kept listening until suddenly there was a loud crash from the room. And let me tell you, I screamed and jumped up so fast and hovered with my hand in the door and outside the apartment. I finally decided that there wasn't a murderer in the apartment and went back to go check what the crash had been. I discovered the lamp that we put in the guest room had fallen over. It was one of those tall, skinny floor lamps. So it's not unheard of that it would fall over, but why? And what was the dragging sound? A few days later, I heard the voice. I was getting home late, and I had to go out of town to take a law school admission test. The most painful 4 hours of my life. Ugh. The drive back was pretty long. I was still in my car in front of the apartment and could see Simon's silhouette through the curtain windows. I opened my car door and I was getting my purse from the passenger seat. That's when I heard a woman say hello. I looked up expecting one of the neighbors beside my car, but I didn't see anyone. "Hello?" I asked clearly. Nothing. I said louder, "Hello?" I heard directly in my left ear, "Hi." It was quiet, but still obviously the voice of a woman. As you expect, there was no one there, so confused and a little bit frightened, I responded. "Hi." Briskly went up to the apartment, didn't tell Simon about the voice that night, but just a couple of days later I heard her again. It was a weekend evening. Simon and I had been in the living room watching a movie. Simon went to go take a shower. I was left to pick something else to watch when he got out. After a few minutes, once again in my left ear, I heard a woman whispering, "Hello," and I tried not to react. I didn't look, I didn't move, probably didn't breathe. I waited to see if I would hear it again. And I did. It said, "Hear me?" Then it was quiet for a moment, and suddenly it was, "Hi. Hi. Hi. Hi." Finishing with a not whispered, but an excitedly exclaimed hi. "Stop!" I finally broke out, turning to the left. No one there. No more woman's voice in my ear. I went to the bathroom and I told Simon about the voice and the lamp falling over. He seemed only mildly concerned, but that man hides his emotions like no other, so maybe he was more freaked out than he let on. He told me I could just be catching auditory glimpses of other planes and not to worry about it. However, the voice has continued and I'm kind of worrying, so maybe you guys can give me some clarity. Here's some things to note. 1. I haven't heard the voice anywhere else, only in or outside of the apartment. 2. Simon has heard nothing, and neither has my mom or friends when they visited. You don't know that. 3. Sometimes my nose is overtaken with a terrible smell like spoiled meat, and only I can smell it. Simon and I are going through some stuff in the guest room, and the smell hit me like a brick, but he couldn't smell anything. I continued to smell it for hours afterward. Same thing happened in the kitchen when my mom was visiting, and she smelled nothing. Check your sinuses just to make sure to rule that out. The voice doesn't happen every day, but sometimes it happens multiple times a day. 5. So far, it's only said hi or hello or hear me with varying intonation. Sometimes I just hear a noise like panting or breathing. 6. When I answer, it usually stops. 7. I've never heard voices before, and at 26, I think I'm past the typical age where schizophrenia crops up. So, what do you think? Am I losing my mind, or something actually communicating with me? And if it is communicating, why only me? I think my biggest fear is that I'm going to get possessed by a demon or something crazy like that in the movies. I don't have time for possession. I'm headed off to law school for a few months. What do I do? I wish you luck. finally a place where I can tell this anonymously. So the following are some of the things that happen to me in a regular note with their dates. Hope people here actually believe me and don't think I'm just faking all of this. Also, I'm Dutch, so these encounters are written in Dutch. I'm going to try my best to translate them. I see, hear, and feel dead people on the regular. So if you have any questions, I may be able to answer. Go ahead and ask. 26/03/2019. Around 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up with the sound of my door handle rattling, as if somebody wanted to enter my room. I experienced this again every hour, and occasionally I also heard nails go by the door. When I heard the nails, I thought it was Mickey, my dog. I also saw a shadow at the door, but when I went to look, there was nothing. Even though I heard the sound continue from the other room next to me, it was like scratching the wall that distinguishes my bedroom and my old bedroom. I lay back in bed and the noises became worse. Then I got the feeling that it was an evil spirit and I shouted, "Get out of here!" Then I fell asleep again. 30/03/2019. I talked to my mother about the case a few days ago. Apparently, this story fits very well with the rest of my experiences. I see ghosts, and I've only consciously been doing this for a year now. But in the past, as a small child, I was already bothered by it. Then I sometimes ran from my old bedroom to my parents because I saw, people in cloaks around my bed. Now I've moved to the room next to my old bedroom, and the old bedroom has become a guest room. Because I see ghosts and I always have the feeling that I have to take a good look around, I have the feeling that my bedroom is my safe zone. This fits very well with the previous story, since the evil spirit wanted to come inside my room did not seem to be able to come in. It also fits in with something I do every day, close to the door of that room. My mother always keeps the door open so there's a little bit of air in the room, so the air is fresh. But I always close the door because I get a bad feeling about it. 05/05/2019. My mother cleaned my old bedroom with sage. I think that's what it's called in English. I don't know the Dutch name. Why this room? Because after telling my story, it turned out a lot of puzzle pieces come together. After the room was cleaned, I had no more problems. I still close the door to this day. 21/05/2019. I've not noted this before, when at the sight of ghosts beginning, at least around that time, last summer I was drinking in the gazebo with some friends. That was the moment that I saw a ghost extremely clearly for the first time. I saw a white figure, a white man walking down the path between the carport and the glass booth. He walked a few times from left to right, but not from right to left. At least he's following book rules. I had a demon, and I think I was saved by an angel. This was back in 2012, October 2012. Let me preface this by saying that the room I stay in, my parents' house, used to be my grandfather's room. It's sort of like an apartment. It's got its own kitchen and a bathroom. He passed in 2005, and I moved into the room in 2009. Ever since I moved back here, every once in a while I'll feel a presence in the room. Someone sitting at the edge of my bed, or holding my hand, or I feel like someone's hand is on my shoulder. This is never ever threatening, and I never feel in danger because I believe it is Grandpa. So, in October of 2012, I was doing my junior practicum. Latiny. This is a sort of program where you go once a week to a school and observe before real students' teaching starts. It was a Tuesday night, and I only remember this because I went to the school on Wednesdays. It was a considerable distance from my house, so I tried to get to bed early. This one night I had trouble getting to sleep, which I never have. I can usually pass out pretty much anywhere at any time. I began to feel an anxiety come over me, and a state of panic. That's another thing that never happens to me. In my mind's eye, I kept envisioning a tall black humanoid figure with a long red tongue standing in the corner of my room. And at the time, it felt very vivid. But now I can't recall any details about this figure except that tongue. I began to feel like if I stayed in my room any longer, I'd be in a serious danger. I went into the next room, our family room, and decided to watch TV. I looked above the TV at the cable box and noticed it was 2:59 a.m. The second the digital clock hit 3, there were sounds of crickets coming from inside the room, in the attached laundry room. Once that box hit 3:01, everything stopped. Now, I'm not a religious person, but my supervising teacher at school is. He had told me that crickets are related to locusts, referring to the biblical plague, and he told me to recite the prayer to St. Michael. He couldn't remember it, but he had told me that he had said the prayer every day and just couldn't seem to remember it. Getting home that day, and accompanying days, it seemed as though there was a fog around my room. The room felt different, just off. I'd come home and lay on my bed for an afternoon nap, and the bed started to shake. Got to the point where my mother began to ask me if anything felt weird. She has her own experiences, but that's a different story for a different day. Now, I live in New Jersey, and in October 2012, we were hit by Hurricane Sandy. We were without power for about a week or so. I wasn't sleeping in that room in the darkness. I moved my mattress upstairs to our living room. Every night that week, a bluish-gray fog came up from downstairs and circled the room, and I began to have dreams. Dreams of religious icons, and the Virgin Mary falling into pits of fire. I'd realized soon after that I forgot my grandfather's birthday. Usually I'd light a candle at church or something for him, and I thought maybe he was angry with me or something. So I went to church, lit a candle. Didn't change anything. A night soon after, however, I had a dream I was driving with Grandma down a road. It was a pitch-black paved road, and it was bright white on either side, like a desert. My grandpa had a really thick Irish brogue, and sometimes it was hard to understand him. But he said something along the lines of always being there. The next morning I told my mom while my youngest brother was in the room, and he interrupted me and began filling in details of my dream for me. I asked him how he knew all of this, and he said, "I was in the back seat." The following night I had another dream. One of those hypnic jerk dreams where you Hypnic jerk dreams where you start to yourself. Only I couldn't wake up. I found myself in a cornfield. I was surrounded with naked, androgynous, grayed children who were dancing around with each other. Kind of looked like the kids in the cover of Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy Album. From behind these children and up from the ground came a giant black monster. Kind of looked like a dragon. I could see the folds in it, as if it were about as clear as day, and it looked down on me. From behind, there was a winged humanoid being, I guess an angel. It had a sword. It stabbed the creature and knelt down in front of me. I woke up, and at the foot of my bed was a white translucent figure. Hovered there about 10 seconds before disappearing. As I looked at it, I felt a peace I'd never felt before. I don't think I'm ever going to feel it again. The dreams and everything stopped after that. I never told my youngest brother about the black figure or the dragon or the children, but fast forward to maybe a year later and I come home from work and my brother's sitting at the kitchen table looking shaken. He tells me he had a dream of a naked child dancing around a dead cornfield and a black dragon behind him. No angel came. But he told me when he got ready for school and left, looking out the window of his room was a large black figure with a long red tongue. That was the last I ever heard of it. Still not particularly religious, but I can tell you ever since that event I sleep with the lights on and have a routine of sleep paralysis. My dead grandma made me a cup of tea. I used to live in a very old house when I was in elementary school. Now, this house looked normal on the outside, but as soon as you stepped in the front door, you could tell this house had a very weird energy. My sister and I usually talk about all the weird things that would happen there, and just how the house had an awful energy overall. I could go on and on about the stuff that happened in that house, but I'll just tell you one story. When I was younger, I was very addicted to computer, and always on Neopets working on my music code page. Kishi music codes. That almost rings a bell, but It was very late at night. While making music codes, I felt this weird energy come into my room suddenly. It wasn't evil or anything, but it felt nice and loving. The weird thing was that I instantly knew that this was my grandmother that passed away not too long ago. I looked next to me and the bed just seemed to indent like somebody was sitting there. I don't know really how to explain what happened next, but I felt that this energy that I assumed was my grandma was telling me that she had to leave, and she loves me. It told me to tell everyone her message. Then, just like that, it seemed to all just disappear. I didn't think much about it after and just went back to making music codes. The very next day, I was getting ready for school. After I got ready, I sat down in front of my computer and was watching YouTube. My mom was in the kitchen asking me if I wanted tea. I just shouted something along the lines of, "Yeah, I want some tea." And I guess the TV was loud and the TV was on too, so she didn't hear me. I said a couple more times, but I gave up because my mom just couldn't hear me. A couple minutes passed, my mom came up all scared and asked me if I came in and turned the kettle on because she said it just flipped on while her back was turned. That was while putting something on the shelf. She looked pretty scared. I don't really know what came over me, but I just looked at her and said in a straight face, "Oh, that was Grandma. She wanted to say goodbye last night. It was her." I don't think I've seen my mom look so freaked out, but I just felt like I had to say it was my grandma for some reason. Finished my tea, went to school, and nothing like that happened again. Stared down by a zombie thing. So I used to live near a really well-known forest for being haunted, known as Black Forest. Now this forest is super creepy and very dark, hence the name. I had one very scary and startling experience while driving through this forest, which made me never step foot in the area ever again. On a weekend, I was invited to go hang out with some friends. I had nothing else to do, so I agreed. It was also around 8 or 9, so it was dark out. Now there are 2 ways I could get to my friend's house. 1, go through the Black Forest, or 2, go around the forest and add 20 minutes into my trip. I usually avoided the forest because the roads were somewhat confusing. I just couldn't see very well because of there being no light. However, today I felt impatient and decided to go through the forest. The ride to my friend's house was very uneventful, but the darkness of it all was very unpleasant to say the least. Stayed at my friend's house, and I started to head back around midnight, or just around 1 a.m. Now this is when I had my first experience. While I was driving, I look at my GPS a lot because of the roads, and I always wanted to check where I was going because some of these roads look like actual roads, but some are actually driveways for a lot of these houses. I didn't want to trap myself in somebody's driveway, so I checked my GPS a lot. I was driving, came to a stop in front of a red light. I was underneath a very dim street light. It was still pitch black, and I was the only one on the road. As I was sitting there, I got a very weird feeling as if someone was watching me. I then looked to my passenger side door only to see this glowing zombie-looking like man wearing what I could only describe as rags. He didn't look alive. His skin looked like it was falling off. He was very gray in color, and he was just staring at me. I really thought my heart was going to explode because I was so scared. Even though the light was red, I floored it. But I wanted to see if the thing staring into my car was actually real. And right as I crossed through the median, I looked back. Nothing was there, and there was nowhere he could have gone that fast. I was spooked and drove all the way home, trying not to hit any red lights. This was before the big forest fire.